Okay, let's dive right into this explainer, because today we're doing something a little radical. I want you to picture the traditional image of the law. You know the one? A pristine, cowering courthouse made of flawless, gleaming white marble. It looks eternal, unshakable, perfectly balanced, right? But today, we're going to get up close. We're going to tear down that pristine facade of traditional legal theory and expose the hairline cracks in the foundation. We are diving deep into Module V, Modern Critical Perspectives. And let me tell you, this is a journey that is going to fundamentally shift how you understand justice itself.
So, imagine walking right up to those massive marble pillars, the pillars of neutrality and objectivity, literally the very concepts we're told hold up our entire legal system. Now, imagine running your hand along the stone and realizing they aren't natural phenomena at all. They're deeply flawed human constructs, meticulously designed to protect the people who already hold the power. That is the provocative, slightly terrifying question at the absolute heart of our exploration today. What if the law, exactly as it's been taught to us, is really just a beautifully crafted illusion?
Act 1, the facade cracks, the end of objective law.
For centuries, traditional theories, think legal positivism and natural law, treated the law like a closed, neutral, almost mathematical science. They claimed, with total confidence, that objective reasoning always yielded objective truth. Boom, case closed. But modern critical perspectives completely shatter that illusion. They vehemently reject the idea of autonomous reasoning. Instead, they reveal that the law is this living, profoundly subjective, and often heavily biased tool. It isn't pure science, you guys. It's a highly contingent human practice, and it is deeply, irreversibly entangled with the messy realities of our society.
Act 2, Critical Legal Studies, where we learn that law is politics.
I want you to transport yourself to the gritty, high-contrast, underground academic settings of the 1970s United States. Drawing heavily on Marxist thought, this absolutely fierce movement called Critical Legal Studies, or CLS, was born. And their entire philosophy boils down to this one radical mantra: law is politics. They argued there is absolutely no special, neutral mode of legal reasoning that somehow floats above the political fray. Every single time a judge makes a ruling, it is a deeply political act enforcing a specific ideology. Law isn't separate from politics at all. It's literally just politics dressed up in fancy black robes.
Now, mainstream theory desperately wants you to believe the law provides a clear, logical answer to every problem. CLS comes in and completely challenges this through the concept of indeterminacy. They show that legal language is actually incredibly vague and completely contradictory. Because of this indeterminacy, a judge can essentially mold the doctrine like clay to justify almost any outcome they secretly desire, all while making it look like a perfectly objective legal deduction. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
And to prove their point, CLS scholars didn't just politely critique things. They utilized a visceral, intellectual teardown technique known as trashing. This wasn't gentle. It involved taking a seemingly logical legal argument or a famous court decision, dissecting it line by agonizing line, and exposing the hidden biases, the massive contradictions, and the raw power structures buried underneath all that heavy legal jargon. It's literally about ripping away the mask of neutrality to see what's actually underneath.
But that begs the question. If the system is really so biased, why on earth do people accept it? Well, CLS points to 3 incredibly powerful psychological and social tools. First, hegemonic consciousness. This is where the beliefs of the elite are packaged and sold to us as just basic, everyday common sense. Second is reification, which is treating totally made-up, arbitrary social rules as if they are permanent, unchangeable facts of nature, like gravity. And finally, denial, the psychological coping mechanism where the law actively hides the glaring contradiction between its lofty promises of freedom and the grim, everyday reality of inequality. By using these tools, the law basically acts as a weapon, convincing the oppressed that a fundamentally unfair system is actually just and inevitable.
Act 3, Postmodernism. Welcome to the deconstruction of reality. Emerging from the vibrant, wonderfully chaotic French intellectual scene of the 1960s and 70s, postmodernism forces us into a dizzying hall of mirrors. We looked at theorists like Jean-François Lyotard. He defined the entire postmodern condition as an absolute incredulity toward meta-narratives. What does that mean? It means a vehement rejection of grand narratives, those sweeping Enlightenment stories we love to tell ourselves about universal human progress, absolute truth, or foundational values. To a postmodernist, these aren't truths at all. They are just convenient stories invented to legitimize whoever happens to be in power right now.
Then we have the brilliant,
Completely paradigm-shifting Michel Foucault, who forces us to rethink power from the ground up. Foucault argued that power isn't just a king sitting on a throne handing down laws from above. Instead, he gave us power/knowledge. Power is this microscopic, invisible web woven through absolutely every aspect of society. It's in our hospitals, our schools, our prisons, and of course our legal codes. It constantly surrounds us, subtly disciplining our bodies, categorizing our identities, and essentially shaping our very reality.
And when it comes to the written law itself, we have to turn to Jacques Derrida and his dizzying concept of deconstruction. Derrida argued that language itself is inherently unstable. By applying deconstruction, we can literally see that the so-called letter of the law is a total illusion. Words have multiple, constantly shifting meanings. Every single legal text is full of inherent contradictions and gaps. It's like pulling on a single thread of a judicial opinion and watching the entire logical sweater unravel right in front of you.
Thinkers like Jameson take this skepticism to its absolute radical limit. They point out that in a strictly postmodern framework, there is essentially no real distinction between reading and misreading a text. The rigid, comforting boundaries of logic just dissolve. It leaves us in this surreal space where we have to seriously question if there is any actual difference between a binding legal argument and mere rhetoric, or even entertainment. It totally strips away the idea that absolute truth exists in the courtroom.
Act 4. Feminist Legal Theory and the Myth of the Reasonable Man. We transition now from the dizzying, sky-high abstraction of postmodernism down to the visceral, grounded realities of feminist legal theory. Conventional law desperately claims to be gender-blind, usually operating under the famous standard of the reasonable man. For generations, the law has used this silhouetted, supposedly abstract standard to determine liability and justice. But feminist scholars absolutely dismantle this. They expose how this blindness is actually inherently male. It actively ignores the diverse bodies, the lived realities, and the completely distinct societal challenges faced by women, essentially measuring everyone against a default patriarchal template.
Now, feminist legal theory is definitely not a monolith. It has very distinct, fascinating branches. Liberal feminism focuses on fighting for formal equality, essentially leveling the playing field so women have the exact same rights as men within the current system. But radical feminism, led by formidable thinkers like Catherine MacKinnon, goes much, much deeper. MacKinnon argues we need to shift our entire focus from difference to dominance. She asserts the legal system isn't just broken or slightly biased, it is fundamentally built from the ground up on the domination and hierarchy of men over women.
Then we have cultural feminism, driven by the profound contrasts drawn by Carol Gilligan. She argues that traditional law relies heavily on an ethics of justice. That's a rigid, male-centric system focused purely on abstract individual rights and cold, neutral rules. She contrasts this beautifully with an ethics of care, which emphasizes empathy, responsibility, and vital human context. It asks us to visualize a form of justice based not on isolated individuals fighting for their piece of the pie, but on communities actively maintaining relationships and caring for one another.
Synthesizing the chaos. Let's pull all of this together.
Okay, before we get completely lost in this massive philosophical maze, let's look at their distinct battlegrounds. Critical legal studies targets the economic and political ideology hiding within legal doctrine, mostly using the concept of indeterminacy. Postmodernism goes after the very structure of language and reality itself, using deconstruction to shatter those grand narratives. And feminist jurisprudence grounds its profound critique in the visceral, everyday fight against patriarchal oppression, questioning the very essence of legal standards. Think of them as three different, incredibly powerful wrecking balls, all hitting that exact same pristine marble courthouse.
Outro. Reimagining the scales. So the fractured marble courthouse has finally crumbled to the ground in front of us. The illusions of neutrality, objectivity, and a perfectly mathematical legal system have been completely torn away. And honestly, it's really easy to view these theories as purely destructive or nihilistic. But I want you to look at Robert Gordon's defense of CLS here. He argues that this deconstruction actually provides genuine grounds for hope. These perspectives didn't destroy the old ideas just to leave us sitting in the ruins. They cleared the ground. By tearing down the illusion, they exposed exactly who was being crushed underneath the old system, based on race, gender, and class. They made true, transformative democratic initiatives possible for the very first time.
And that is exactly what I want you to take away from this explainer today. The law is not handed down from the heavens on stone tablets. It is a profoundly human, deeply flawed enterprise. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to ponder long after we're done here. If the law is not an objective science, but simply a powerful, sprawling story that we continuously invent and enforce, well, now that we hold the pen and we see all the flaws,
What kind of dynamic, empathetic, and truly inclusive justice are we going to design next? The blank page is ours.